The yellow school bus rattled down Maple Avenue, its windows streaked with morning condensation. Inside, a quiet 12-year-old girl sat near the middle, clutching her worn backpack against her chest. Her name was Amara Johnson. With medium dark skin, curly black hair tied back in a neat puff, and deep brown eyes that seemed far older than her age, she already carried the look of someone who had lived through more storms than most kids her age could imagine. Amara had just moved with her mother, Danielle, to a modest apartment on the west side of Atlanta, Georgia. Danielle, a single mother who worked 2 jobs, one as a waitress at a diner, the other cleaning offices at night, hoped the new neighborhood would bring her daughter a better chance at peace. But peace was not what Amara would find. On her first day at Westview Middle School, the air buzzed with that familiar cocktail of adolescent energy, sneakers squeaking in the hallway, lockers slamming, clusters of kids huddling in tight circles of laughter and whispers. Amara walked slowly, scanning the walls decorated with faded motivational posters and the scent of cafeteria food seeping through the vents. She wanted to belong here, more than anything, but the cautious way she held herself, shoulders hunched, eyes lowered, made her stand out. "Who's the new girl?" A voice muttered nearby, laced with curiosity and mischief. A tall, freckled boy nudged his friend. "She looks different." Different. That word hung in the air like smoke. It wasn't said kindly. In homeroom, Amara slipped into the back row seat, her notebook pressed flat on her desk. The teacher, Mrs. Miller, smiled warmly, introducing her. "Class, let's welcome Amara Johnson, who just transferred here. Be kind and make her feel at home." Some kids clapped politely. Others rolled their eyes. Amara forced a small smile, whispering, "Thank you," though her voice trembled. At lunch, she sat alone at the end of a long cafeteria table, tray untouched. She traced circles in the mashed potatoes with her fork, pretending not to notice the clusters of kids staring, whispering. She wished her mother's words from that morning could echo louder. "Baby, don't let anyone make you feel small. You've got a gift in you bigger than this whole world." But Amara kept her gift hidden. Music was her refuge. At home, Amara would lose herself at the old upright piano her mother had saved for years to buy at a thrift shop. The cracked keys, though imperfect, carried every ounce of her soul. But in school, surrounded by watchful eyes and sharp tongues, she buried that part of herself. For now, she was just the quiet new girl. A shadow drifting through crowded hallways. Little did Amara know, those whispers and stares were only the beginning. And soon, the cruelty waiting for her would test not just her strength, but the very dream she tried so hard to protect. The second week at Westview Middle School was worse than the first. Amara had hoped that if she stayed quiet, kept her head down, and focused on her work, the spotlight would move away. But middle school had its own laws, and in that jungle, silence only painted a bigger target. It started with whispers. "Why does she wear the same shoes every day?" one girl sneered, her manicured fingers pointing at Amara's faded white sneakers. "She probably gets them from the trash," another chimed in, her voice dripping with laughter. Amara's cheeks flushed, but she said nothing. She pressed her eyes to the pages of her math workbook, pretending the numbers could shield her from their words. Then came the tricks. A pencil flicked at the back of her head during science class. A note shoved in her locker that read, "Go back to where you came from." Laughter that spread like wildfire whenever she passed by. And leading it all was Brianna Collins, the queen bee of 8th grade. With sleek blonde hair, designer sneakers, and a family name everyone in town seemed to know, Brianna moved through the halls like she owned them. She wasn't just popular, she was untouchable. Teachers adored her polite smile, parents whispered admiration at PTA meetings, and students followed her every move. To Brianna, Amara was the perfect target, quiet, new, and different. One rainy afternoon, Amara sat on the steps outside the gym, waiting for the bus. The air smelled of damp pavement and wet grass, thunder rumbling low in the distance. She clutched her backpack close, humming softly under her breath, a tune she made up, notes tumbling from her like a secret no one else could hear. But someone did hear. Brianna stopped mid-stride, her umbrella tilted just enough to shield her glossy hair. "What was that?" she asked sharply, eyes narrowing. Amara froze. "Nothing." Brianna smirked, tilting her head. "She sings now. Guess she's auditioning for the circus." Her friends laughed, their voices echoing cruelly off the wet bricks. Heat surged through Amara's chest. She wanted to stand up, to shout that she wasn't just some joke, that music was the only thing keeping her alive. But the words never left her lips. Instead, she sat in silence, the rain mingling with the sting of her shame. Later that night, Amara sat at the old piano in her apartment, her mother humming along as she cooked dinner. The keys were chipped, the wood scarred, but to Amara, it was treasure. She pressed into the melody she'd been humming, pouring out her pain, her longing, her unspoken voice. "Baby, that's beautiful," Danielle said softly, wiping her hands on a towel. "One day, the world's gonna hear you." Amara wanted to believe her. But after another day of whispers, laughter, and Brianna's sneer seared into her mind, all she felt was small. What she didn't know was that her silence, and her music, were about to collide in ways no one at Westview could have imagined. If you were Amara, walking into a new school where nobody wanted you there, what would you do? Would you fight to prove yourself, or would you keep your head down to avoid the pain? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe every child deserves a fair chance, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more inspiring stories. The morning sun peeked through the dusty blinds of Willow Creek Middle School, casting long shadows on the polished linoleum floors. For most students, it was just another day of chatter, laughter, and rushing to class. But for Amara Johnson, a quiet 12-year-old black girl with curious brown eyes and a heart full of unspoken dreams, it was another battlefield. Amara clutched her notebook tightly to her chest as she walked down the crowded hallway. She had filled its pages with stories, sketches, and dreams of becoming an author one day. To her, those stories were a safe place, worlds where kindness won and courage was celebrated. But outside the pages, reality was different. "Look who it is," sneered Brianna, the ringleader of the mean girls. Her perfectly braided ponytail swung behind her as she blocked Amara's path. "Didn't anyone tell you? This hallway's for normal kids, not weirdos with their nose stuck in a book." Her friends cackled, and one of them, Jenna, snatched the notebook from Amara's hands. She flipped through it and mocked, "Listen to this. One day, a girl who was ignored will rise and shine brighter than the stars." "Wow, Amara, you really think anyone's going to read this junk?" The laughter cut deep, but Amara stood frozen, her throat tightening. She wanted to snatch her notebook back, to scream that her words mattered, but fear weighed her down. She stayed silent. The bell rang, and the crowd thinned. Amara picked up her notebook after Brianna tossed it to the floor like trash. The corners were bent, some pages torn. She pressed it against her chest, whispering to herself, "Don't cry. Not here. Not now." At home, the silence of their small apartment greeted her. Her mother, Danielle, worked double shifts at the hospital and was rarely home before midnight. Their furniture was secondhand, their fridge often half empty, but Danielle filled every space with love. On the kitchen counter was a note written in her hurried handwriting. "Baby girl, heat up the soup I left in the fridge. Remember, the world can be unkind, but don't you ever forget, you're stronger than you think. Love, Mom." Amara smiled faintly and tucked the note into her notebook. Her mother's words were like armor against the day. That night, Amara sat at her desk by the window. The streetlights flickered outside as she wrote in her notebook. "They laugh now. They don't see the fire growing inside me. But one day, the same voices that tried to silence me will beg to hear my story." Her pen moved faster, her imagination spinning worlds where the hero was always the underdog, always someone like her. The next week at school brought more cruelty. In the cafeteria, Brianna deliberately tripped her, spilling milk all over her shirt. "Oops," she smirked, loud enough for the whole table to hear. Laughter erupted again. Amara wanted to disappear. She rushed to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, and pressed her forehead against the cool metal. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Why me? Why every day? Suddenly, she heard a voice. Soft, shaky, but kind. "Are you okay?" It was Lila, a shy girl from her science class who rarely spoke up. She slid a handful of tissues under the stall door. "I saw what they did. It wasn't fair." Amara wiped her tears and unlocked the stall. Lila stood there nervously, holding her own lunch tray. "They don't like me much either," she admitted. "But maybe, we don't have to eat alone. That small act of kindness lit a spark in Amara's heart. For the first time in weeks, she smiled, a real one. She wasn't entirely alone anymore. Over the following days, Amara and Lila grew closer. They shared lunch, exchanged stories, and discovered they both loved music. Lila played the violin, while Amara dreamed of playing piano but had never touched one. "You've got a gift for words," Lila encouraged one day. "And gifts don't stay hidden forever. Trust me." Amara wanted to believe her. But Brianna wasn't done. One afternoon in the library, Brianna snatched Amara's notebook again and waved it in the air. "Everyone. Wanna hear the wannabe author's latest fairy tales?" Her voice echoed, drawing giggles and whispers. Amara's stomach knotted. She wanted to shrink, to run, but then she remembered her mother's note, Lila's encouragement, and the fire she wrote about in her pages. She took a shaky breath, stepped forward, and said, "Give it back." The laughter died down. Brianna blinked, surprised. "What did you say?" "I said give it back," Amara repeated, her voice trembling but firm. "My words aren't trash. They're mine. And one day, they'll mean more than your insults ever could." The library went silent. Even Brianna seemed caught off guard. With a scoff, she dropped the notebook onto the table and muttered, "Whatever." But Amara felt something shift inside her. She had spoken up. And though her hands were shaking, she had taken the first step toward her voice. That night, Amara wrote until midnight, pouring her heart into every page. Her words grew bolder, stronger, as though she was writing not just for herself but for every child who had ever been silenced. And deep down, she knew, this was only the beginning. If you were in Amara's shoes, standing up to a bully in front of everyone, would you have spoken up or stayed quiet? Tell me in the comments, I want to know your thoughts. And if you believe Amara's courage deserves to be heard, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Spring came to Willow Creek, but for Amara, the chill of bullying hadn't fully thawed. Though she had spoken up once, the echo of that small victory was still fragile. Every morning she walked into school with her notebook pressed tightly against her chest, a silent shield. But the whispers never stopped. "She thinks she's brave now. Did you hear her speech in the library? So dramatic. She'll never be anything." Brianna and her circle were relentless. The school corridors carried their laughter like cruel wind, stinging Amara's heart. Still, something inside her had changed. Each night, she wrote more fiercely, her pen scratching across the paper with urgency. Her notebook had become her secret world, and inside it, she wasn't the girl mocked for dreaming, she was the girl who triumphed. One morning, the principal made an announcement. "Attention students, this year, Willow Creek will host its first talent showcase. All grades may participate. Auditions begin next month." The cafeteria buzzed with excitement. Musicians bragged about their skills, athletes joked about showing off tricks, and performers planned routines. Amara's heart skipped. A stage. An audience. Could she? "No way you're thinking of signing up." Brianna's voice cut through her thoughts. She leaned across the lunch table, smirking. "What would you even do, Amara? Read one of your boring little stories? Trust me, no one wants to hear them." Amara bit her lip. She didn't answer, but the seed had been planted. That night at home, she asked her mother. "Mom, do you think I could perform something at the showcase?" Danielle, exhausted from a double shift, looked up with tired but loving eyes. "Baby girl, you've got a light in you the world needs to see. If you feel called to share your words, do it. Don't let anyone steal that from you." "But what if they laugh?" Danielle reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Then let them laugh. Because while they're wasting their breath, you'll be using yours to change lives." From that night on, Amara prepared. She selected one of her most powerful pieces, a story about a girl who faced ridicule but rose above it. She practiced reading aloud in front of the mirror, then in front of Lila, whose encouragement never wavered. "You've got this," Lila said, smiling. "Your words, they make people feel something. And that's rarer than any talent." But as auditions grew closer, the weight of fear pressed down harder. What if she froze on stage? What if Brianna mocked her in front of everyone? The night before auditions, Amara sat by her window, staring at the stars. Her notebook lay open on her lap. She whispered to herself, "They won't decide who I am. I will." The auditorium was buzzing on audition day. Students shuffled nervously backstage, clutching guitars, juggling balls, or humming tunes. Brianna strutted by in a sparkling outfit, announcing she'd be performing a dance number. When Amara's name was called, her knees trembled. She stepped onto the stage, the spotlight blinding. The microphone loomed in front of her, a reminder that all eyes were waiting. For a moment, silence pressed heavily against her chest. She could almost hear Brianna's mocking laugh in the crowd. But then, Amara remembered her mother's voice, her friend's faith, and the fire she had written about countless times in her notebook. She took a deep breath and began to read. Her voice wavered at first but grew steadier with each line. They called her weak, but she held strength no one could see. They called her small, but her dreams reached higher than the sky. They called her nothing, but one day, she became everything they wished they could be. The auditorium fell silent. No giggles, no whispers, just quiet attention. As she read on, her words painted pictures of resilience, courage, and the quiet strength of the overlooked. By the final line, Amara's voice rang with conviction. And when the voices tried to silence her, she spoke louder, until the world had no choice but to listen. A pause followed. Then came something Amara had never expected: applause. Real, genuine applause. Lila clapped the loudest, beaming proudly. Even a few teachers stood, nodding in approval. Brianna, however, sat stiffly, her smile gone. Amara stepped off stage, heart racing, hands shaking, but for the first time, the trembling wasn't fear. It was triumph. That night, Danielle returned home early. Amara told her everything, her words spilling over like a waterfall. Her mother hugged her tight. "See, baby girl. I told you, your voice is stronger than their laughter." But Amara knew this was only the beginning. She had faced her fear, and while the road ahead wouldn't be easy, she had tasted the power of being heard. For the first time in her life, she didn't just hope things would change, she believed they could. If you had a chance to stand on stage and prove everyone wrong, would you take it, or walk away? Let me know in the comments. And if Amara's courage touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe so we can keep telling stories that inspire. The weeks after the audition brought a strange shift in the halls of Willow Creek Middle School. Amara no longer felt invisible. Some students nodded at her in passing. A few whispered compliments under their breath. Teachers seemed to watch her with a little more respect. But where there was light, there was also shadow. Brianna was furious. Her performance had gone well enough, but it was Amara everyone was talking about. The applause, the hush of the audience, the way her words seemed to hang in the air, it haunted Brianna's pride. "She thinks she's somebody now," Brianna hissed to her friends one morning. "Trust me, I'll remind her she's not." Amara didn't care as much anymore. She walked taller, her notebook clutched not as a shield, but as a banner of who she was becoming. Still, old wounds don't heal overnight. Every cruel glance, every muttered insult carried weight. One afternoon, as she left class, Brianna shoved her shoulder hard against the locker. "Careful," she sneered. "Wouldn't want the new school poet to trip." Amara steadied herself, taking a deep breath. She didn't reply, though her silence seemed to fuel Brianna's rage. At home, Danielle noticed the change. Amara wasn't just surviving, she was growing. The glow in her eyes when she talked about the showcase, the way she practiced her readings with more confidence. But Danielle also knew the danger of pride. She sat her daughter down one evening. "Amara," she said gently, "you've been given a gift. But remember, not everyone will celebrate it. Some people will fight harder when they see you rising." Amara nodded. "I know, Mama. But I can't hide anymore. Even if they hate me for it." Her mother smiled softly. "That's my girl. Just promise me, you'll never lose your kindness while finding your strength." The talent showcase finally arrived. The school auditorium was transformed with bright lights, decorations, and a stage that seemed larger than life. Families filled the seats, the air thick with chatter and anticipation. Amara peeked from backstage, her heart pounding. Danielle was out there, sitting in the third row, her tired face glowing with pride. Lila waved excitedly from beside her parents. One by one, the acts took the stage. Dancers twirled, singers belted out songs, comedians cracked jokes. The audience clapped, laughed, cheered. Then it was Brianna's turn. She dazzled in a glittering costume, spinning and leaping with practiced precision. The crowd cheered loudly. It was an impressive performance. Brianna bowed with a smug grin, soaking in the applause. But Amara noticed something different. The cheers weren't the same as before. They weren't whispers of awe, the kind she'd felt when the audience had gone quiet at her audition. And then, it was her turn. The announcer's voice boomed, "Next up, Amara Johnson, performing an original spoken-word piece." Amara stepped into the spotlight. The auditorium hushed. She clutched the microphone, scanning the faces in the crowd. For a moment, fear clawed at her throat. Then she began. Her words flowed like a river, steady and strong. They told her to shrink, to fold into the shadows. But shadows only exist because of light, and she was born to shine. Her voice rose, weaving a story of resilience, of a girl mocked and belittled but unbroken. She spoke of nights filled with tears, of mornings faced with courage, of a future that belonged to those who dared to believe. Every sentence struck chords in the audience. Parents leaned forward. Students listened, transfixed. Even teachers wiped at their eyes. By the final lines, Amara's voice thundered with conviction. "So when they say you're nothing, stand tall and say, 'I am everything I was meant to be.'" The auditorium erupted. Applause crashed like thunder, louder and longer than she had ever imagined. People stood. They cheered. From the corner of her eye, Amara saw her mother crying, clapping with trembling hands. She saw Lila on her feet, cheering until her voice cracked. And she saw Brianna, sitting frozen, her forced smile barely hiding the storm in her eyes. When Amara stepped off stage, she was shaking, but it wasn't fear. It was power. It was joy. Teachers crowded around to congratulate her. Other students whispered words of admiration. For once, Amara wasn't invisible. She wasn't mocked. She was seen. That night, as she sat by her window with her notebook, Amara wrote just one line. "They will never take my voice again." She closed the book with a smile, knowing this was only the beginning of her story. The talent showcase was over, but the ripples of its impact spread far through Willow Creek Middle School. The next morning, the hallways hummed with chatter, not about Brianna's polished dance, but about Amara's powerful performance. "She made me cry," one girl admitted at her locker. "Did you hear how the whole crowd went silent?" another said. "She's so brave. I wish I had that kind of courage." For the first time, Amara walked through the halls and didn't feel like prey. Heads turned to notice her, but not with mockery, there was admiration in their eyes. But not everyone welcomed the change. Brianna's jealousy was a storm brewing beneath the surface. To her, Amara's rising confidence was an insult she couldn't tolerate. For years, Brianna had ruled those hallways with her sharp tongue and flawless image. And now, this quiet black girl, the one she had mocked and belittled, was stealing her crown. 2 days later, the principal called Amara to the office. Nervously, she walked in, clutching her notebook. "Amara," Principal Reynolds said warmly, "I want to congratulate you again. Your performance wasn't just impressive, it was moving. We've decided to submit a recording of it to the Regional Youth Arts Festival. You'd be representing Willow Creek." Amara's jaw dropped. "Me? At the festival?" "Yes," he said with a smile. "You've earned it." Her heart soared. She raced out of the office, running straight to Lila, who squealed in excitement. But when Brianna overheard, her eyes narrowed. She clenched her fists so tight her knuckles turned white. "She doesn't deserve this," Brianna hissed to her friends. "I'll make sure everyone sees the real Amara." Rumors spread quickly. Notes appeared on Amara's desk, "Fake. Attention seeker." Whispers followed her down the halls. At lunch, Brianna accidentally knocked Amara's tray to the floor, sending food splattering across her shoes. But this time, Amara didn't run. She bent down, cleaned the mess calmly, and stood tall. Her silence spoke louder than any insult. Danielle noticed the bruises of these battles in her daughter's eyes. "Baby, you can't let her drag you down," she said one night. "Every time you rise, she'll try harder to pull you back. But don't let her. Don't give her that power." Amara nodded, but inside she wrestled with fear. Could she really keep going? Could she face the festival, knowing Brianna's cruelty would only intensify? The day of the regional festival arrived. The auditorium was 3 times bigger than Willow Creek's, filled with students, parents, and judges. Danielle and Lila sat in the front row, their faces beaming encouragement. Backstage, Amara felt her knees trembling. She whispered to herself, "You belong here. You belong here." But then, Brianna appeared. She had somehow convinced the coordinators to let her perform too, slipping into the same lineup as Amara. With a smirk, she whispered, "Break a leg. Or maybe, break your voice." Amara's chest tightened. But she remembered her mother's words, her friend's belief, and the echo of her own applause. She gripped her notebook and waited for her name. When the announcer called, she stepped onto the grand stage. The lights blinded her, the silence was deafening, but then she began to speak. Her story was deeper now, sharper, more alive than ever. She spoke not only of bullying, but of survival, of how every cruel word had forged her strength. She told the story of a girl who refused to disappear, a girl who turned her pain into poetry. Her voice rose and filled the vast space. They tried to bury her, but they forgot, she was a seed. And seeds don't die in the dark. They bloom. The audience erupted into cheers, louder than anything Amara had ever heard. Danielle wept openly. Lila stood on her chair, clapping and shouting, "That's my best friend." Even some of Brianna's own friends clapped, their loyalty shaken by the undeniable truth of Amara's words. When Brianna's turn came, she danced beautifully, but the energy in the room had shifted. The applause was polite, but nothing compared to the standing ovation Amara had received. Brianna bowed stiffly, her face burning. For the first time, she realized the cruel power she had wielded so long was slipping away. Later that evening, the judges announced the winners. Amara was awarded first place, her piece praised for its authenticity, courage, and artistry. She held the small trophy in trembling hands, unable to believe it was real. Danielle hugged her tightly. "You've done it, baby. You've shown them all who you are." But Amara shook her head, smiling through tears. "No, Mama. I've shown myself." Back at school the next week, the atmosphere had shifted permanently. Students who once mocked Amara now greeted her with respect. Teachers invited her to share her writing in class. And Brianna, she sat in silence, watching her power fade. The queen bee of Willow Creek had been dethroned, not by cruelty, but by courage. Amara walked the halls no longer as prey, but as a survivor, a fighter, and a voice that could not be silenced. She had become living proof that no matter how deep the pain, the light of resilience could shine brighter. Don't forget to share your thoughts about this story in the comments section. Like and subscribe so you don't miss out on more stories from Blackpool.